All right, so first I'm going to apologize. I was going to put a video out yesterday, but that turned to crap. I got the audio out of my podcast, and the audio out of there sounded like a really bad phone call into some like NPR session. It was horrible. So I didn't produce it. I'm not going to put crappy quality out there. And another thing for my podcast, I'm not going to use their software anymore. I'm just going to pre-record it and then upload it. I get better quality out of this anyways. I don't see why I should sacrifice quality for the sake of promptness. At any rate, there was one thing in there that really bugged the living shit out of me, and I think I'll call that one out today, and that is the realm of critical theory. Now, critical theory is really kind of stupid and very fucked up, and I think it can be best explained by here. So on platostanford.edu, we have the entry of critical theory. And let me just read the first section off to you. You can see why it's absolutely retarded. Critical theory has a narrow and broad meaning in philosophy and in history of the social sciences. Critical theory, in the narrow sense, designates several generations of German philosophers and social theorists in Western European Marxist tradition known as the Frankfurt School. According to these theorists, and I use that term loosely, a critical theory may be distinguished from a traditional theory according to specific practice or a specific practical purpose. A theory is critical to the extent that it seeks a human emancipation from slavery, acts as liberating and influence, and works to create a world which satisfies the needs and power of human beings. Because such theories aim to explain and transform all the circumstances that enslave human beings, many critical theories in the broader sense have been developed. They emerge in connection with many social movements that identify varied dimensions of the domination of human beings in modern societies, both in the broad and narrow senses. However, critical theory provides the descriptive and normative basis for social inquiry aimed at decreasing domination and increasing freedom in all their forms. Right, so think about it this way. When you hear somebody say critical race theory, they're not speaking about a theory that actually is grounded in science, that is provable and interchangeable and can be proven in any meaningful way. What they mean is slavery. Critical race theory is to say who is enslaving who. Now you see why, whenever you're arguing with one of these SJW nitwits that have learned critical race theory, they immediately go to slavery. 200 years ago or 150 years ago, however long you want to fucking put it, they were slaves, especially the blacks. Therefore, because of slavery, we deserve special treatment. That's pretty much it. In the Marxist lens, which I went over in my podcast at length for an hour, and in the previous video where I said it's us versus them, it's a black and white social dichotomy, which is very, very antithetical to traditional Western values. Critical theory basically is Marxism through a social lens, social studies lens. So anything that's about sociology, gender, race, any other demographics that you can think of, economic status. Basically, it's trying to find a black and white dichotomy, label one side as the oppressor and the other side as the oppressed. In other words, critical theory is not an explanation or description of how the world works. No, they use the alternative definition of describing a concept. Not even a guess. They're not even using theory as a guess. They're using it as describing a concept. So when somebody says, in theory, this should work, that's saying with all the facts and relevant information, this should come out the way we expect, but no guarantee that it will. With critical theory, we're saying this is how the black and white dichotomy of this particular subject works. Therefore, we want to change it. So when critical race theory comes out and they say, yes, we have this dichotomy of blacks are being oppressed by whites, and they're being oppressed through a concept called whiteness. Therefore, we must destroy or dismantle this whiteness. When you hear feminists come out and say that women are receiving less than men, women are being oppressed by men, therefore, we must change this dichotomy and dismantle the oppressor's power. It's a power dynamic. It's a stupid power dynamic because it's not true. When you take a critical theory and test it, actually test it in the scientific method, meaning you use a qualitative or quantitative method, and be careful with qualitative. I think I got into that earlier where I say, if you're using a qualitative method and it's, autoethnographic, you might as well shoot yourself in the head because you're doing a Dear Diary. It's useless. Well, in critical theory, they're doing pretty much the same thing. Here's two sides of a coin. One side is always up or top. Why? Because they're a bigger population. Therefore, they oppress the bottom side of the coin. But coins have edges, and there's a lot of edges in there. In fact, the coin's probably not shaped the way a coin should be in their power dynamic. Maybe it's an upside-down pyramid coin. Maybe the coin is a chunk. It's not actually flat like we'd think a coin is, but its monetary value is nonetheless the same. It's a rupee, if you want to put it that way. Either way, this critical theory nonsense is essentially the attempt to influence people into believing that there is a black and white dichotomy. And unfortunately, this is where it gets really sinister. It works. Works because we are tribal humans. We are a collectivist, conscious thinking society. We think in tribal terms, unfortunately. This comes from survival instincts, as evolution has taught us, that sticking with your group is much safer than stepping outside of your group or even disagreeing with the group. So when you have a group of humans that all go to university, you've set them up to be in a tribe. Nothing is challenged. Nothing has changed. Used to be that university is where you get your mind challenged. In fact, an anecdotal story that I have to share is the last time I was at residency several years ago. I went through 6 or 7 people saying, thank God for them being able to take this journey and reach where they are and all this other stuff. And then it became my turn, and I says, I can't believe all of you are praising God when it was you that put yourself here in the first place. Now, I particularly don't believe in any God. I don't think they exist at all. So when I step in and I try to get something done and I'm here to improve myself and I'm proud of myself for getting here, it's because I pushed and fought and strove to get here. I take credit for my own actions. And 2 of them were like, oh, so, but do you believe in a higher power? And not unless it's myself. And that floored them. Except one came up to me after and says, my son talks that way too, and I kind of agree. I mean, I did a lot of the work. I was like, you did all of the work, for hell's sake. Anyways, that's a side note bar story. Hardly has anything to do with critical theory, right? That's where you'd be wrong. The dichotomy in there was I was one of 3 men in that entire room going for our doctorates. So yes, even in an online or offline or virtual school, whatever you want to call University of Phoenix, the parity of men to women is women are in there more. And there's a larger number of them, except for in IT. I will have to say that. When you go into the Masters of Science or the Bachelors of Science or anything like that, we had like 2 women in there. But when I did like the MBA, for example, it was majority women. The doctorates was majority women, and the doctorates is of management and education. We had 2 or 3 there that were doctorates of nursing. And by and large, I was the minority when it came to that dichotomy. According to critical race theory, if I were to take that dichotomy and look at it in a Marxist lens, those women were oppressing me in class because I am the minority, and my voice wasn't easily as heard as the majority in that setting. Of course, they extrapolate from a larger context and try to apply it to smaller ones, which is why critical theory isn't a theory at all. It's a boisterous attempt, a demonstration at trying to define power struggles where there is none, where in fact it's an individualist power struggle. It's not a group or collectivist power struggle. It's not a bunch of people trying to reach the CEO position, and another bunch of people trying to reach that CEO position, when there is in fact only one CEO position. It's a collective group of both men and women, black and white, whatever, all trying to reach the same goal. The only power struggle there is a one-to-many in that case, because you have the one guy that's already sitting in the CEO position, and you have several people who are trying to reach that CEO position, to give a power struggle there, where real power sits, in fact. It's not a white guy is at the top, and therefore they are oppressing everyone else, when there is clearly no evidence of that. Another thing that bugs me about the critical theory is it's very antithetical to our own laws, behaviors, and ethics that we have decided upon as a nation. For example, we have laws that state you're not allowed to discriminate by race, age, color, sexual orientation, or whatnot. It's not allowed by law. It is antithetical to our laws. But in critical theory, those power struggles exist, and therefore you must dismantle them by bringing them up more. We should offer more time to the marginalized voices, in other words. In other words, give somebody special privileges based upon their race, age, sex, sexual orientation, and whatnot, which is directly antithetical to equal opportunity. That's all I have for today. That was one piece that annoyed the living freaking hell out of me. I'll leave a link in the description so you can read this entire thing. It's actually kind of interesting, but it really outlines that anybody that does gender studies and women's studies, and they come out talking about critical race theory or critical gender theory or critical anything theory or critical theory in general, they're a Marxist. They're essentially saying there's a power struggle. It's easy to refute. It really is. Have them outline that power struggle and show them that their black and white thinking is incorrect. And not by giving examples. You essentially say something like, well, men are oppressing women. How? How are they oppressing them? Well, they don't have the right to choose. Is that true? Can you choose right now? If you were pregnant, can you go get an abortion? And then if they go to generalizations, you say, no. Stick to the question. You, as a person, just got pregnant. Let's say, worst case scenario, you actually raped and you got pregnant from that rape. Can you go get an abortion right now? If the answer is no, they're lying. Prove them wrong. If the answer is yes, well, then how is a man stopping you from doing that? You just said that men are oppressing women and you don't have the right to choose. Well, you just demonstrated that you indeed do have the right to choose. So how is that possible? If they go to the wage gap, you say, well, just like Jordan Peterson pointed out, so rightly so, that the multi-factor analysis has been done. Are you saying you don't have the right to choose an alternative lifestyle to the ones that lead to success? Are you saying that success is not in your own hands, that it's in somebody else's hands? You're being necessarily stopped from doing what you want to do. Then why are you here right now talking to me? Is this what you wanted to do, or would you rather be doing something else? Then go do that thing. That's fine. That's your decision. But you haven't proven your point, have you? You're here to argue. You're here to fight. Why? Anyways, you basically point out the dynamic in their power struggle and give them or work them into an individualist position and narrative where they cannot escape from, because in actuality and reality, this power dynamic, this power struggle that they pretend exists and out of this critical theory actually doesn't exist in the way they're thinking. There is a power struggle, don't get me wrong, but it's everybody against everybody. It's not group against group. There can only be one person in power, usually. That is how our hierarchical structure works. That's how it's worked for hundreds of thousands of years. We're developed that way. Some people are just keenly more interested in being the figurehead than others. And that's just the way it is. There's plenty of evidence to say so. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Apologize for yesterday. Like I said, I was planning on putting one out, but that didn't work because that audio was just no. It was really bad. It was really, really bad. If you want to go listen to my podcast in general, it's on Blog Talk Radio. You can go find it over there. I also have it in RSS feed. It's also on theaxiomprinciple.com if you want to go look there. And thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed this.
How dare you challenge me with your so-called kung fu? You don't have a chance.